This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict with me, Jake Hanrahan. Today we're speaking to writer Joe Kassabian. He's going to be talking to us about the new ongoing blockade or siege of Stepanakert, which is the capital city for Armenians in Artsakh or Karabakh, the contested region between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan sent fake eco-protesters to blockade the Lachin corridor, which is the only road in and out for Armenians. And now they've replaced those fake protesters with armed military, and they're basically trying to starve people inside Stepanakert. If you like what we're doing, support us at patreon.com/popularfront. Right, Joe. So there's yet another awful situation going on in Armenia, specifically within Artsakh or Karabakh, whatever people want to call it. The Azeris have blockaded the Lachin corridor. Maybe explain to us what's going on there and why that is such a bad situation.
Yeah. So for starters, the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Artsakh are two different things. And the Lachin corridor, that one road that leads from the Republic of Armenia to Artsakh, Karabakh, whichever, is effectively the only way that 150,000 people who live there get any supplies whatsoever. There is an airport in Stepanakert, but the Azeris have threatened to shoot down anything that flies near it. So airborne cargo is impossible. So this one road is the only way that around 150,000 people get food, medical supplies, everything. And we're currently in the middle of winter. Winter in nagorno-karabakh is significantly worse than it is here. So they've been strangled. It's been about a month now.
It's -4 right now there.
Yeah, and it's basic medical supplies are all gone. There's been a few people that have died because of lack of medical supplies. Obviously, Stepanakert and other places in Artsakh have intensive care units that have patients in them, whether they be children or elderly people or whoever, and they can't get the medical supplies they need because those medical supplies come from the Republic of Armenia. There's no food. There's strict rationing going on. And I would argue that what is happening right now is not a blockade exactly, it's a siege. Yes. Because while the Lachin corridor is blocked, there's still constant, repeated ceasefire violations going on all across, people simply trying to tend to their fields, tend to their animals, whichever. They can't go anywhere without being shot up by Azeri soldiers. So this is, a multifaceted siege that is happening to a group of people, which I believe I've said on this show before, who just want to fucking live. They just want to be left alone. They just want to move on with their fucking lives. The last 3 years has been fucking terrible for them. And I'm sorry for swearing so much, but
mate, I have the worst potty mouth on air. Don't worry.
Yeah, and it's getting increasingly worse. And this excuse of what these quote unquote protests are is. It's fucking laughable at best.
Well, yeah, let's get into that. So this siege started with this isn't an opinion. It was blatant for anyone with a brain. It was very clearly a kind of fake ruse. So Azerbaijan ostensibly eco-activists said they were out there blocking the Lachin corridor for various eco reasons, but very quickly it became obvious that they were not eco-activists whatsoever. Now they've literally been replaced with soldiers with guns. Maybe take us over that. How did this blockade start?
So like you said, it started with these quote-unquote eco-protesters, which is ironic since free association of people and protests are not rights guaranteed in the Republic of Azerbaijan. At the same time that these eco-protests have been going on, there's been different protests going on in, say, Baku that are just relentlessly crushed by police. And from the very beginning, people who work in like intelligence gathering, OSINT type stuff have quite conducively pointed out that a lot of the people who showed up there at first in civilian clothes pretending to be protesters were actually in the military. They'd had pictures taken during the 2020 war, during the September invasion when I was on the show last time. These guys aren't eco protesters at all. From my understanding, this concept of eco protesting has to do with mines in Artsakh, which is pretty fucking ironic when you see how polluting that the Azeri oil production system is. It's one of the worst in the world, outside of like maybe Nigeria. But pretty shortly after that, Azeri soldiers, I believe special forces, began appearing behind the eco protesters, taking up positions just in case the off chance that the Russian peacekeepers actually tried to do something, which of course they haven't. Which, I mean, that doesn't surprise any of us at all. And like these protesters, I'm using heavy finger quotes here when describing them, are burning tires and shit for warmth. Like they murdered a pigeon, which is probably one of the most iconic pictures that has come out of this thing so far. Is these peace and eco protesters, whichever, are like this woman is screaming about how Armenians are destroying the environment while literally shaking this pigeon to death and then trying to throw it into the air. Which is fucking incredible.
It was laughable.
Absolutely nobody takes this at face value because it can't be. This is a country where there is no freedom of protest. There is no freedom of speech. Dissidents are routinely disappeared into prisons. Dissidents overseas are routinely assaulted and murdered. Like, this is not a place where you can protest. But they did miraculously find the one piece of land that Azerbaijan claims is their own that you can freely protest on, which is strange that just happens to be the one road that the people of Artsakh need to live. It's strange how that works out that well for Baku.
Yeah, right. Like authoritarian state. If you try and protest, we've seen it. You will get beaten to a pulp or even put in prison. But then suddenly there's one area where you can, and it happens to be the area that will make life for Armenians extremely miserable and actually deadly if the road is blocked. It's funny how that works out. Eh?
Yeah, and there has been some vehicles that have gotten through. Mostly International Red Cross. I believe they brought a few pediatric patients through, single, like 2 or 3. And those areas have said, like, see, look, there's supplies coming through, and those are actually supplies for the Russians. They have nothing to do with the civilian population there. While all this is going on, the rhetoric from Baku is also beginning quite worse. They no longer kind of beat around the bush when it comes to claiming areas that are within the Republic of Armenia. I'm not even talking about Stepanakert, which of course they also claim, but within the Republic itself, they've started referencing it as Western Azerbaijan, talking about the Zengezur corridor again, which is what the invasion in September was about. I mean, this is, if I was to think of a reason as to why this is happening, because and at the same time, they're also shutting gas off, which goes into Stepanakert, and it's the middle of winter. There's no heat, they can't cook, things like that. Is they're seeing what they can get away with. There's no question here that nobody is under any kind of illusions that the Russians were going to do anything. September has more than proved that the Russians will do nothing. Yerevan and Stepanakert could be on fire, and the Russians will do nothing.
What is their role? For anyone that doesn't know, there are Russian, quote, peacekeepers in the region. What are they actually meant to be doing? I know when Azerbaijan invaded Armenia, last we spoke, I believe they're still occupying land, right, of the Armenian, Armenia proper, not just Artsakh. When Azerbaijan invaded, then I read through the kind of obligations that Russia had to the Armenians, and they broke them all. They didn't do any of them. But maybe you can explain, what should they be doing right now, do you think?
I mean, in my opinion, I wish the Russians would leave, but and I'm not the only one who believes that.
Yeah.
However, now as far as why they are in Artsakh is because the 2020 war was part of the deal that ended the war, that Russians would kind of exist as a buffer between the two sides, and with this idea that they will stop continued violence, which they haven't. And they also are in parts of the Republic of Armenia for the same reason. And in September, now it's very, very strange. So obviously the Republic of Armenia is a military ally of Russia and the rest of the CSTO. Not that Armenia had much of a say in the matter. It was just like the Eurasian Economic Union. They were forced into it because that's how imperialism works. But Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh is not. So while in 2020, the Joint Defense Pact was not activated because that is not considered the Republic of Armenia. The Republic of Armenia does not claim Stepanakert as part of the Republic of Armenia either. But in September, when the Republic of Armenia was invaded, it should have triggered a joint defense pact with Russia and a few other countries, and of course they did nothing.
Not only did they do nothing, they actually ran away from their own base. Right?
Yes, they did. Yes, while actively still supplying arms to Azerbaijan, even in the middle of the war with Ukraine. And I mean, I'm by far not the only person to believe that the 2020 war happened with their blessing, because in this region, something like that does not occur without the Russians go ahead. But insofar as this blockade goes, like it per the agreement, they should be keeping the road open. They should be keeping the Lachin corridor open. That is within their protocol, or whatever it is that you want to call it. They're simply not doing it because I don't think they know how. And quite honestly, I don't think they want to. Russia benefits from instability in this region. That's how they can continue to keep Armenia within their sphere of influence, because like we saw in September, Armenia is starting to pull away because they realize it doesn't do anything for us. Right. There's huge protests here in September against the alliance against Russia. Just recently, the Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, said that we would not be taking part in joint military exercises with them in Armenia because of their not doing anything. I mean, Russia is no friend of Armenia's at all. And oftentimes the country is seen, especially in the West, as being, a proxy, a lapdog, a tool, whatever it is you want to call it. Like we're almost seen like Belarus, and it's absolutely not that.
No.
And that this blockade, this siege, this whatever it is you want to call it, is just another symptom of that. And I think, again, Russia is letting it happen because they see Armenia slowly pulling away. Russia could easily end this. They simply don't. The same thing with Azerbaijan. They could end it anytime they want, but they know they can get away with this. It's like they're seeing what they can get away with, because no matter how many times Aliyev says that he does not want a third war, et cetera, despite the fact he invaded the Republic only a couple months ago in 2022, it's pretty obvious that the Artsakh situation, whatever it is you want to call it, will only end one way, and that's through military conflict. Azerbaijan will never ever cede this territory because it would hurt their national identity, national mythos. It would collapse the government. It would cause all sorts of problems. And obviously, you can't expect 150,000 people or so to willingly sign away their own lives to a government that wants to murder them. So there's no way that this is going to end in any situation other than military conflict or true international community intervention. I don't mean Russia. I mean UN peacekeepers or
that's never going to happen, though.
Of course it's not. I'm not fucking delusional.
No, I just mean like it's so sad that that's not even really an option.
No, and the other option I see bandied about, especially by like the ANCA and other elements of, if you can call them like Armenian think tanks or whatever, they're like, oh, there needs to be some kind of airlift. It's not going to happen. None of these things are going to happen.
Airlift? What do they mean by that?
Like kind of like the Berlin airlift, where like, which is, it's not going to fucking happen.
No,
it's never going to happen. And that's like, I said a little while ago, is every time this sort of thing happens, there's a group of Armenians who will say, is the international community going to sit back and let this happen? And the answer is always a resounding yes. Like, the international, like there's no such thing as international community, and that only depends on who you're fighting. Nobody would give a fuck about Ukraine if they weren't fighting Russia. This isn't because people like Ukraine; it's because they don't like Russia. Russia is a geopolitical enemy to the West. If we were being invaded by Russia, we would get the same treatment. Instead, we're being invaded by a country that nobody's ever heard of, like that. And their closest ally is Turkey, who is in NATO. This isn't about right and wrong or geopolitics, or morality or ethics. This is about geopolitics, and geopolitically Armenia is fucked. And that means Artsakh is even more fucked.
Yeah.
And the true problem is there's no other way out of it. Like it's just like I said a couple months ago. Like the only way out of this is by giving the people who are being victimized the means to defend themselves so this doesn't continue happening. Otherwise, I don't see how it ends.
What do you think the goal of this blockade actually is? Why is Azerbaijan doing this? Because to just siege Stepanakert, I very much doubt that's the end goal. Make everybody miserable. There must be something after that. I mean, what do you think?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be one part of several things. Generally, they don't do one thing at a time. You see this protest blocking the road, quote unquote protest blocking the road. And then you'll see ceasefire violations. You see an escalation of rhetoric about territorial claims of the Republic of Armenia. I do think it is a testing. I mean, for one, they have effectively proven how easy it would be to shut Stepanakert down with or without the Russians being there. And it is now 2023. We're kind of like those peacekeepers are only there for 5 years as of 2020. This is not a long game. This is not a long game. So, I mean, they've pretty much effectively shown how, in the case of a military confrontation, how easy it would be to shut that road down. And that would completely separate the Republic from Artsakh. And that I think that is reason enough to see. I mean, they're doing it with virtually nothing. If you've seen pictures of the protests, there's not that many of them because there doesn't need to be. I mean, the Russians are completely gutless and spineless, and they're that way because they are that way. And you can't expect, because I mean, I'm sure there's been massive protests in Stepanakert, hundreds of, like tens of thousands of people, easy, like a vast amount of the population of the city gathering in the streets. If they really wanted to, they could walk down there and break that fucking break that blockade, but it would end in violence.
Yeah, the blockade now has rifles.
In my opinion, that is what the Azeris want. I mean, because think of it this way: how long can you expect these people to sit under siege as supplies continue to dwindle? Do you expect them to just sit there and die in silence? Because there's no food coming through. There's no medical supplies coming through. Things are going to come to a breaking point. And that, I believe, is what the Azeris want, because it gives them a reason to do violence. Like, oh, look, these people were just attacking these peaceful protesters. Something maybe akin to that.
Yeah, definitely. What is it actually like for people in Stepanakert right now? Give us an idea of, the consequences of this happening to them.
I'm personally not in Stepanakert. I live in Yerevan, but from what I have seen from people that I know, very little food on the shelf, strict rationing of what they have left. I've seen multiple people go to the pharmacy for drugs that just don't exist. Doctors themselves are writing prescriptions that are saying like, "Hey, if you can find it, good luck." But it's very much a city under siege, and it's unfortunately something people in Stepanakert are used to at this point. But this is going on close to 30 days, and I truly don't know how much is left for them to continue going. Things like important medical supplies are all but gone. Schools canceled because there's no food. So like it's just this continuous process of re-victimization of the most victimized people in the region. 3 years ago they were cluster bombed and invaded, and they buried thousands of their kids and their dads and their brothers and their sisters. Then that same generation, not too much later, doesn't have food. They can't go to school. They do have, they probably have realistic worries about what happens next, because like you said, this can't be it. There's got to be a bigger goal than just making them miserable. They're cold, they're hungry, they're not going to school, their lives are being stolen from them day by day, and with no remedy. And it truly is a question of how many times can this continue happening before something bad happens. I mean, this is a place that has its own military. How long until something happens there? And I do have to think that is what Azerbaijan wants, but at the same time, I can't fucking blame them. No one is helping them. So what do you expect them to do?
Well, they're going to run out of food, right? I mean, I know Stepanakert has some kind of self-sustainability, but not enough to keep everybody fed when the whole fucking city is closed off.
Yeah, I mean not just this. These are all the outlying areas as well. Nobody's getting anything, and it's winter. There's nothing to harvest.
What about aid? Aid trucks allowed through, Red Cross, etc.
No, Red Cross has been allowed through on a handful of occasions, and I say handful as in one hand, to transport very only a few very sick patients from Stepanakert to the Republic, but not to bring anything in. But even with that, several patients in hospitals have died. And with sporadic gas, which is being turned on and turned off by Azerbaijan, it's only a matter of time before someone dies of exposure, or this leads to more illnesses that cannot be treated, which leads to more deaths. And not to mention the coming problem that will come with deprivation of food and water and you name it. Like there's no aid being allowed through.
So Azerbaijan, EU's biggest new gas partner, I should mention, NATO's big time ally, are choosing to essentially try to starve people out of their lives, starve people to death. That's where this will end up if it carries on. What have the international community said about this, if anything?
I've said a few times, every time you see that someone is deeply concerned, take a drink. Because nobody's done anything.
We made the t-shirt because it's so fucking comical now.
Yeah. I mean, the EU doesn't even pretend to be deeply concerned anymore because you know why. There's a few vocal people within the American government, but the American government will do nothing. No, I mean, the international community is a joke unless you're fighting someone that they dislike. If this blockade was by Russia, we'd be fine. But because it's by Azerbaijan, we have the people in Artsakh just have to deal with it.
It's quite incredible that literally conflicts, geopolitical turmoil really does boil down to cheerleading. Yes. Good guy versus bad guy perception. I guess it's to be expected, but it's really dark. I always tell people, like, when they kind of get in this thing, which is very popular now on Twitter, treating war like a football match that you cheer on from your cozy house. Look at Armenia.
Well, those people fucking sicken me.
Oh, they're disgusting. They're psychopaths. It's incredible. I've never seen. It's very funny. The kind of people that used to say about us, like, "Oh, Popular Front, you have no decorum in the way you do your reporting," and now the same people literally cheering on mangled bodies because it's the bad guys.
The same thing happened to us in September when Armenia was invaded. Like, well, they're allies with Russia, so go Azerbaijan. It's like. Man, I'm sorry that your life is so deeply unfulfilling and unhappy that this is how you have to spend your time, but please go pay attention to your kids.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, if you look, I say to people, look at Armenia. These are people stuck between a rock and a hard place, and they've basically fallen short on every level. So they've fallen short of the, correct opinion sphere through no fault of their own. And then they've also fallen short of getting any actual backing from the so-called bad guys, because it's just not worth it for those people. And those bad guys, bad as that they are actually bad, Russia, like you said, is supplying both sides. So I hate to be, again, I always feel like it comes back to the same thing when talking about Artsakh and Armenia, but how the fuck does this get solved other than just total massacre? I just don't see how this happens. And sure, the Artsakh military, they can do their thing. They're good people. I've met them, brave soldiers, but then they're not going to last against Azerbaijan. We just know, like, what's going to happen.
To quote the former director of Doctors Without Borders, you don't stop a genocide with doctors. Everybody knows what needs to be done. Everybody. No, anybody with two brain cells that can rub together knows what needs to be done to stop this from happening. And unfortunately, they're gutless fucking cowards. That's all it is. They're willing to sign the death warrant of hundreds of thousands of people if it means getting some cheap gas.
It is literally that simple. Like, it was actually astounding to me to see, what's her name, Ursula, the head of the EU, being like, "Oh, this great partner in Azerbaijan." And I actually looked up, because I'm like a nerd. I looked up the EU charter, and Azerbaijan, just the way it conducts itself, breaks almost every single part of the charter that says, to be a partner with the EU, you have to have this, and the other as part of your country. And it's like, oh, well, suddenly it doesn't matter. And I get it. Of course it doesn't matter. I don't mind that. It's like, yeah, I just wish these places would stop acting like moral arbiters. It's like, no, this is just a business deal. This is all it is, like, it's crazy. People in England, when we had Brexit, they were waving the EU flag like it was a country. And it's like, yeah, it was better to stay in, but for fuck's sake, it's a business deal. There's no soul. There's no nothing.
No, of course it's not. Anybody who believes that there's this norm of European, the norm of European ethics and morals is pure fucking evil. Look at it. Every time I see that come up recently, I can't fucking laugh from where I'm sitting. We're like the only free and fair democracy in the region, and with freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of protest. Armenians fucking love protesting. Happens all the time.
You had a peaceful revolution.
Yeah, we're members of the Council of Europe. We're members of all of these treaties. And just so, if you're in Europe and you're listening, like, your heads of state are selling out hundreds of thousands of people, so you might be able to afford gas this winter.
And I think, people always said, oh, why are you always on about that? It's like, well, because the kind of narrative is being shaped that we're the good people and we're on the good side. It's not about that. It's literally a deal. And yeah, like you said, it's never been about that. And of course, Europe is going to just drop all moral pretenses to get the gas. Like, of course that's going to happen. But stop pretending that means we're somehow the good people. It's insane. Like, it's, obviously not like individuals. I just mean the kind of institutions. It's madness. In terms of the conflict, obviously like you said, Armenia was invaded last year, and Azerbaijan is still occupying some regions. You were saying that there is still, it's not a full-on war now, but people are getting killed. I know that there was some farmers were shot dead since we spoke last, some Armenian farmers. Maybe give us an idea of what that situation is like now, the front lines and occupied regions.
That is generally what you can consider the new normal. That has been the normal in Nagorno-Karabakh for decades, even before the 2020 war, is this constant border conflict. And it's terror violence. They want to sow terror. That's all it is. They want to scare people away from living their daily lives. They want to terrorize people until they leave. It's effectively no difference between them and ISIS. And especially when you look at the actions that they take when they invade somewhere, it's literally ISIS. There's no hyperbole about it. It's no whatever it is you want to call it. Like, they want to, look at what they're doing in Artsakh. They want to terrify these people into submission. And then at the end of this, whenever this siege ends, because it will end at some point, what they probably hope is as many people as they can get run to the Republic of Armenia.
If people want to escape Stepanakert, they want to get out. Can they even get out? They won't even let them out?
No, nobody can get in. Nobody can get out.
Jesus.
Yeah, I do think that's, it's a multifaceted approach at genocide or ethnic cleansing, which is a term I don't like because it has no definition, where they want to depopulate this area by any means necessary, because the government, while they claim Stepanakert and the outlying regions, they have no control over it. And one day, whether it be through military efforts or otherwise, they might. But they don't want Armenians to be there. And whether that be through outright violence, which we have both seen, or through things like this, where they want to create an environment where life can no longer exist, which is one of the UN definitions of genocide. They want that area to not have anybody in it.
Do you think, I know it's impossible to tell, but do you think hypothetically, if Armenia said, you know what, let them all out, we'll move, we'll leave Artsakh, have it all, do you even think then that Azerbaijan would stop? Because I don't, just personally, from what I've read, from what Aliyev has said, he's literally, and people in his government have said, we want to do, literally, they've basically said, we want to do genocide too on the Armenians. And we saw last year they invaded. So
they claimed the city that I'm sitting in, the capital of Armenia, which has been here longer than Rome was a city. Like, there's no part of Armenia that Azerbaijan does not claim. The only thing that would happen if, God forbid, if Stepanakert fell to Azeri forces, is it would probably speed up what happens next.
Yeah.
Because, I do think Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, whatever, is a is a indelible part of their national mythos. Ever since the 90s, they've kind of built this Azeri identity over or around the loss of the first war and now the victory during the second. And I do believe that the repossession of these areas is very, very important to them. But also, if you've noticed this rhetoric of Western Azerbaijan and, you know, whatever the city names that they're calling these Armenian cities in the Republic, that's becoming much more prevalent because they're simply priming the next mythos, which is, well, we've taken this, we can keep going, because their ultimate goal is to connect with Turkey. And we're sitting in the way of that.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. I mean, they've said as much in kind of in a roundabout way. And so do you think then it's safe to say that Karabakh is kind of now the buffer zone between Armenia and Azerbaijan as opposed to contested region? I
think it's always been. Yeah. A very intelligent person once said that it wasn't Armenia guaranteeing Artsakh's safety, it was Artsakh guaranteeing Armenia's safety.
Yes.
And you kind of saw during the 2020 war, when all of these areas were taken, how quickly everything changed. And I think that's still the case. And I don't mean to say that Artsakh is a proxy or a buffer zone. I think it's the front line.
I think that's a really good point. What are people saying? You know, Armenians, what's the kind of talk, you know, from your average Armenian there about this situation? Are they blaming, obviously they're blaming Azerbaijan, but, you know, is that manifesting in anti-government in Armenia or what? What's happening?
I've seen, Armenians come from every direction, honestly. I mean, there's a fair anti-government through line through a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people don't like the prime minister. I count myself amongst them. But for the most part, I think people are pretty on the same target of, you know, like this protesting is obvious bullshit, and the Russians are gutless for letting it happen because this is literally their responsibility per treaty. The Artsakh Defense Army cannot open the Lachin corridor because of this treaty, because the Russians are there. That's supposed to be the Russians' job to keep this road open and keep, you know, be peacekeepers. So I think most of the anger is certainly directed at those two, and, you know, rightfully so, because I also believe that most people are smart enough to realize there's really nothing the Republic of Armenia can do, whether they wanted to or not. There's a lot of anger at the world, again, for letting this occur again. But I also think that's always kind of simmering in the back burner for all of us, is like, you know, once again, nobody's doing anything. And you know, up until very recently, that was just how we existed. But, you know, you see how the world reacted in, you know, during the invasion of Ukraine, where like complete Western unity to help this country that was being invaded and victimized by an imperial power. So like, you know, up until then, most Armenians were just like, yeah, of course we're by ourselves, whatever, nobody cares. But it's like, well, you guys cared about this. What the fuck? You get a fraction of that in our direction, even just the money. The weapons, literally any portion of the kind of international support. But again, we were invaded by the wrong people. We're being victimized by the wrong people.
The most they'll get is someone might recognize the genocide. But
and that took 100 years of effort.
Right. It seems like modern day, no one cares. It really does seem like that. Even in America, where there's such a large community.
I mean, it doesn't matter how big your diaspora is. It doesn't matter how useful you are in a given time. It depends on who you're fighting. Like, Look at what the West did to the Kurds as soon as ISIS was largely defeated.
Oh yeah, cheers, bye.
Sold them out to Turkey. Yeah, bye, good luck, fuck you. Like, they don't have a state. There's nothing to invest in. Bye.
The American dream. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and it's because they were fighting the right people. You know, if Armenia was fighting ISIS, and to be fair, Armenians were in the SDF and fighting ISIS.
Yeah,
but like, it doesn't matter who you are. It matters who your enemy is. And our enemy is effectively the West's friend. So they're willing to turn a blind eye to a siege of 150,000+ people who are slowly being strangled to death. They're willing to turn a blind eye to beheadings and rapes and you name it.
It's incredible that is actually a really good point, and I'm sure people are sick of me going on about it. But for so-called liberal Western values to literally say that Aliyev is their new friend to supply gas and completely ignore the fact that that same government has awarded some of the most brutal beheading war crime type situations. It just blows my mind, the fact that it's just what so you believe in nothing. Like, yes, of course they believe in nothing. That's the problem I have. It's like, yeah, of course that's how it is. Of course no one cares about this. Of course no one cares about that. I just wish everyone would stop fucking pretending.
Yeah, I mean, while the siege was going on, President Zelensky wished Aliyev a happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's like, well, I mean, it's like, well, yeah, of course that's going to happen. You know what I mean? Of course that's going to happen. But then at least be honest. Just be like, yeah, no, we don't actually have values. We just look out for ourselves and what helps us. Well, yeah, that's been the same for the last 1,000 years. It's just bizarre that people think it's not that anymore.
No, it's marketing. It's like NATO, the NATO and EU. I mean, for the good and the bad that they do, because they do both. It's all just marketing. I mean, you can't claim to be some defender of democracy and then allow this to happen, or have Turkey in your ranks.
yeah, the number 2 jailer of journalists in the world, but ignore them and then say, well, China's bad. It's like, well, yeah, but also I think them lot are as well. It's crazy. But anyway, I could rant about that for days. One thing I'm interested in, we spoke about briefly, not on the podcast, but the formation of militias, I believe, is getting a little bit more prevalent, right, in Karabakh, in Armenia proper.
Well, the militias were quite prominent before, not so much in Artsakh, from my understanding, because it's much smaller. From my understanding, the government's done a pretty good job at attempting to like centralize them, kind of put them under something resembling oversight. But they're still quite prevalent. I mean, how could they not be? Especially after September, when, you know, because, you know, we have quite the toxic masculine culture here, where it's like, how can women possibly pick up weapons? But it's like, at the same time, it's like the military can't be everywhere at once. And we've seen what happens when they get their hands on men, women, or children. It doesn't matter. So like, they're really like, some of these rural areas, what else can they possibly do? You know, and rightfully so, they should be able to protect themselves, because when it comes down to it, they might be all they have. And we're not getting territorial defense militia army equipment. We're not getting any international support. Most of these people are training without guns or body armor. Like, hopefully they get a gun if the time arises, but like, most of them just have a uniform, if that. So it's quite literally training from nothing. Just because, you know, when you're defending your home, this isn't about material goods. This is about life. Yeah, you can retreat from your village, but they'll come to the next one and the one after that, and their goal is the destruction of the people here. There's only one way to stop that.
How are these kind of militias? How are they getting weapons then? Because they're obviously not getting it from the military. The military barely has enough as it is. How do they arm themselves? Is it just from like what's around, or what?
I think it's a combination of a few things. Honestly, I can't speak with authority on the subject, but some government, some private, some fundraising.
I think there's
gun laws are very strict here, so you know
they
have ways around that, I suppose. Oh God, yeah.
Really interesting. All right, mate. Is there anything else you want to say about this situation?
Honestly, at this point, I don't know what else to say.
Are there any charities or anything that people can do to maybe help? I mean, I just don't think there is, but I don't know.
Unfortunately, none of the charities will get there.
Right? Yeah.
It's what's one of the problems is without a fundamental change in the realities on the ground, there's literally nothing we can do. And you know, like I've said before, it literally requires one country, any of them, France, the US, fucking Canada, it doesn't matter, anybody, Russia for that matter, to do literally anything to stop 150,000 plus people from suffering and maybe dying. And they've chosen to do nothing.
You're in Yerevan, right? What's the reaction like there? Are people doing much there? I mean, I guess there's not much they can do to help, but there is something, surely.
I know there's in the rural areas closer to the road to get there, there's quite a few groups of people that are like Artsakhs that are being put up. children, adults, whatever. And there's been quite a bit of charity drives for them personally, because, they've been separate from their family since before Christmas. But, unfortunately, it's there's really not a lot we can do. We can, because like, for instance, in September, and this is quite common here, whenever there's an escalation, you'll see boxes in parks and stuff for socks, clothes, cigarettes, whatever, for soldiers and civilians that are on the front line, because we can get them there. But here it's like, we can raise as much money and clothes as we want, but what can we do with it?
And there's no other routes through the mountains or anything like that, because it's kind of in a basin, right? Stepanakert, from what I remember. Now
they are constructing a new road, from what I understand, but I have no idea when it's going to be ready. Who knows? I mean, it's a hard place to build a road.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you can carry like anything that is going to make any difference over a jagged rock mountain.
No, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why this is happening.
And Azerbaijan said they'll shoot down, helicopters or anything like that.
Well, that's been one of the constants. Is like there's been it's derelict now, but there has long been an airport in Stepanakert and or near Stepanakert. And one of the things that would make living there much more comfortable is flying in normal cargo planes, passenger planes even, so you don't have to drive there. But they've said years ago anything that flies near the airport will be shot down.
Nah, there's not really much hope. Let's hope something happens anyway.
It's just the different facets and layers of terrorism.
Yeah. Joe, where can people find your work?
So I'm the host of the Lines Led by Donkeys podcast, where we talk about military history. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm also an author. You can check my stuff out anywhere you find books under the name Joe Kassabian, or you can follow my very stupid Twitter account at jcass99.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Thanks, man. That was Joe Kassabian speaking about the horrible situation in Artsakh or Karabakh, where the road leading into Stepanakert has been completely blockaded for over a month now, and it's looking like people are going to actually start to starve. Very bad situation, not a lot of coverage, but that's the way things are. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, trying to bring attention to underreported conflict situations, please do consider supporting us. There's lots of bonus content at patreon.com/popularfront. That's how we keep things moving forward. Also, if you want, you can buy merchandise at popularfront.shop. Believe it or not, a lot of that actually funds our documentaries. We have a new documentary out right now at youtube.com/popularfront. It's called Partisan 22. I think what's the YouTube title? I think it's Russia's anti-Putin underground. It's a documentary about literally that, anti-Putin Russian partisans, saboteurs. It's been received well. People like it. Go and watch it if you want. Thank you very much to our sponsors. They are Oracle Coffee Shop in Portland, Oregon, USA. They're an independent coffee business selling only fair trade products. See them at 3875 South West Bond Avenue, 97239. Also, thank you to Grind Core House, a pair of independent coffee shops in Philadelphia, USA, one in South and one in West. Find them on social media at Grind Core House. We're going to be releasing a very specific Popular Front coffee bean style, whatever, with them soon. So yeah, hopefully that does well. And also thank you to Propagandopolis, an outlet selling and writing about historical conflict propaganda from around the world. You can buy prints at propagandopolis.com. Use the promo code POPULARFRONT10 for 10% off. Follow us on social media. Twitter at popularfront_, Instagram at popular.front, TikTok at popular.front, and of course the youtube.com/popularfront. Music in this episode, the intro was by Home and the outro was by Sam Black. See his music at samblackpf.com or look him up on Spotify, Sam Black PF, you'll find him. We do keep meaning to add stuff to Spotify, but it's just another thing to do. It's another expense, but it is how it is. We will be putting new stuff up there soon though. But yeah, the best place to see all his music is samblackpf.com. That will take you to his SoundCloud. Thank you very much to the high tier Patreons. They are Christian Bustamante, Mike Jones, Britt Richardson, Victor Villa, Daniel Verdin, Margosha, Rohan Irvin, Titus Perkins, Ryan Barbadillo, VS, Brian R, Evan Pank, Bradley Hope, Wizard Actual, Claire Hoffbauer, Benjamin Tupper, Chungus Bongwater, Siddhartha O, Damien, Cameron Collins, Q Loves Cake. That's that fucking name, man. Nicholas Blomberg, Matthew Diffley, Claire, Liana, Robert, Sean, Christianovich, NTHG, Arthur Raphael Macias, Ethan Zwick, Kefir is the Mind Killer, Elise Middlefart, David McManus, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Bradley Davies, No Dogs, No Hamsters, Brendan Crave, B, Drift, RX, Tiki Lover, Ben Marshall, Dallas Dunn, Shikhar Gupta, LD50 Seattle, K Glitter Vulcan, Bethany Swoland, Adam H, Derivative Fool, Bottle of Water, Larson 8669, Ivan Julien, Bjorn Kirsten, DS, Michael O'Connor, Disgrunt, Jack Doherty, Nicholas Butter, JD, Jav, James Cully, Tynan Daly, Ethan, Shanklin the Painter, Fitz Madrid, Ed Coulthard, D. San, Mike Barone, Ben, Liam Williams, Chris Cusimano, DZA, Georgia Arani, DR, Amy R, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Amelia Me, Christina Ravetti, Freya Northman, Neber, Noah, Andrew Hurley, Vida Provost, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lochrin, Young Wasabi, Tony Bin, JL, Stephen Davila, Dan Dunham, Chad Walker, Lawrence Abrahams, What Bitcoin Did with Peter McCormick, Christopher Martin and Ryan Sandercock. Thank you all so much. Some of these, man, like some of you lot have literally been with us from almost day one looking at it. I mean, yeah, really very, very much appreciative of that. Thank you so much. This year I've got a lot of big plans for Popular Front. I know I'm always moaning, we don't have the money to do this, but fuck it, I'm gonna work a way out. I just did a live stream on the YouTube there, on the Popular Front YouTube channel, and did really well. Got like quite a bit of money, enough to pay for the flights for our next documentary on the super chat. So I'm thinking, maybe that's like a way. But we're trying to find new ways. I've got some other freelance projects coming up this year, which a lot of it I try and split a quarter or at least half of the money I make from that and put it into Popular Front. Fuck knows, it's not the best way to do things, but fuck it, let's go.